Hi knitting friends, Shaina Bilow here. In today's video, I'm going to walk you through the steps of working a very simple mathematical equation that will help you figure out how to space increases evenly across a row or round when a pattern asks you to do that. So occasionally a knitting pattern, some of them might be mine, will ask you to increase a certain number of stitches across one row or round without giving super explicit instructions. Maybe that's done because there are a lot of different sizes and to do it would take up too much space on the paper, or maybe because some numbers might be a little vague, even to the designer. So in this video, you'll grab a calculator, a pencil, and get your math brain going, and we will work out how to take charge of your knitting patterns and increase evenly across a row. So get ready for some knitting math with me. Before I talk about the equation that we're going to use to figure out how to increase evenly, I'd like to just demonstrate what we're thinking about here and what we're doing. So if you have a number of stitches on your needle and the pattern asks you to increase evenly across, what the pattern or designer is asking you to do is to have equally sized spaces as best you can between your increases, so that everything opens up kind of at the same rate. Sometimes that's less possible than others. I'll show you in some of our examples. But essentially, the equation for working your increase can be one of two things, and it all depends what kind of increase you're using. So if you're using a make one or yarn over increase, you will follow the first equation that I demonstrate. And don't worry, we'll talk about it. And if you're doing something like a knit front back increase or a lifted increase, you'll follow the second equation. And the reason for that is a make one or a yarn over increase does not use a stitch to create itself. So with a make one or a yarn over, a make one is worked off of this part right here of the stitch, right of the middle of these two stitches, and a yarn over comes out of the middle of those two stitches as well. I didn't have to touch either of those two stitches to create a yarn over or a make one. Whereas when I'm doing a knit front back increase, I'm actually using this stitch to work the extra stitch on top of it. So you need to use a stitch when you work one of these increases, same as the lifted increases. So you have to take that into consideration with our equations. So let's get started. So with our first equation here, this one is more relevant to the make one or yarn over increase. And we'll start with a kind of simple equation, right? We have 100 stitches on our needles, and our pattern is asking us to increase 10 stitches. So 100 divided by 10 equals 10 stitches between each increase. So 10 is the number of stitches between each increase. So as you were working across your row, you could work knit 10, yarn over, and you would do that 10 times. Something to look out for, though, is that if you're doing a yarn over or a make one, you do need to be in between two stitches to work it. So you may want to shift your stitches over and work something like this. Knit 5 and then yarn over. And then knit 10, yarn over, and do that 9 times. And then knit your remaining 5 at the end. So you're splitting up your 10, one of your repetitions of 10, and putting half at the beginning and half at the end, so that you've got an increase that goes like this instead. So that you've got some space here to work with, so that your increases are all in the center. Just something to think about, okay? And you can fudge that if you want. You don't even need to be as extreme as this. You could just knit 9 at the beginning, then yarn over, knit 10, yarn over, and then have one spare stitch at the end. That is okay. You are allowed. All right, so that's our first example, where you would knit 10, yarn over 10 times, simply. Okay, that was an easy equation. Now let's go a little more challenging, and we're going to be doing one. This would be a knit front back increase. So there are 2 steps to this equation here. the first step is figuring out how many stitches we're working with for our increasing. So if we have, in this instance, 120 stitches on our needles, and we want to increase 20, we need 20 stitches to work our increases off of because we're working knit front back. All right, just as a reminder. So X in this case equals 100 because 20 of our 120 stitches will be used for increasing on. So 100, which is X, right? If 100 is X, divided by our number of increases, which was 20, equals 5. That is our number of stitches between each increase. So this row, written out, would look something like this. Knit front back, knit 5, and then repeat across row. Something like that. Okay? Because again, this knit front back needs a base stitch to work off of, so we have to account for that in the number of stitches that are not used in our increase, in the number of stitches that are between. As you may have guessed, not every equation will end in a nice whole number like we had in our first two examples. So in our next two examples, I will be demonstrating how I figure out when I have decimal places, when I don't have a whole number as my result. So let's start again with our make one yarn over equation. And in this case, let's say we're starting with 60 stitches and the pattern is asking us to increase to 84. So to get to 84 from 60 means we have to do 24 increases. So divided by 24. 60 divided by 24 equals 2.5 stitches between each increase. You can't knit a half a stitch. So what you can do is think of this two ways. You can figure out what the next whole number is. We need to multiply this twice in order to get to a whole number, which is 5. Or you can write it out if you're not so mathematically inclined that way. So what I mean by writing it out is doing something like this, where you take knit 2.5, make 1, knit 2.5, make 1. So you can't knit a half a stitch, but what you can do is take this half of a stitch and add it to this number here. And then this whole piece turns into knit 2, make 1, knit 3, make 1. And that's what you would repeat across. If this made sense to you, multiplying 2.5 times 2 to get to the whole number, then that 5 is here and here. I split the 5 into 2 pieces. So 2 plus 3 equals that 5. Or the half from this piece added to the half from that makes this the whole number jumped up to 3 and the whole number jumped down to 2. So that's how you would work with a decimal point like that. Sometimes they're wacky, it's like a 0.333 or something like that. You can do your best to just fudge it in. A 0.333 would mean that every third increase has an extra stitch. All right, but let's try now with our knit front back increase on the next one, and we're going to do another fascinating increase equation scenario. All right, so let's say that we have 100 stitches on the needles and we want to increase 16. So our goal is to get to 116. We're going to start by subtracting 16 because those 16 stitches need to be the jumping off point for our increase. So 100 minus our number of increases equals 84. So 84 equals X. So X, 84, divided by our number of increases, which was 16, equals 5.25 stitches between each increase. All right, so we know that we can't knit a quarter of a stitch, but let's figure out how we would how we would do this. So knit 5 1/4 and then knit front back. Knit 5 1/4, knit front back. Knit 5 1/4, knit front back, and then knit 5 1/4, knit front back. So I'm going to take this quarter, and this quarter, and add each one to this. So this turns into 6. This turns to 5, 5, and 5. So it's knit 5, knit front back. Knit 5, knit front back. Knit 5, knit front back. Knit 6, knit front back. So a quarter, right? 4 quarters makes a whole. So that would up you to 6 for that other piece here. So 0.25, you need 4 of these to get to a whole number. So 1, 2, 3, 4 repetitions of the 5 where one of them has the extra stitch would get you your increase. And again, as I said, this is a great jumping off point. If you have a number like 6.27 or something like that, or 6.333, you could knit 6, knit front back. Knit 6, knit front back. Knit 7, knit front back. And you can fudge a little. If you get to the end of the row and you need to knit an extra stitch, or you have a leftover or a spare, or if you're short by 1 or 2, you can fudge and just make sure that you get generally your nice even spacing of increases. That's what it's all about. So this is an amazing jumping off point. And it's always fascinating to put math together with knitting, because knitting is so soft and flexible, and math is so inflexible. So you have to come up with a nice way to mesh the two together. I can't wait to hear about your successes. So please let me know in the comments how this worked out for you. Happy knitting!